I never thought I'd be the kind of man to go through my wife's phone, but there I was, standing in our dimly lit kitchen at 1 in the morning, staring at her screen, my hands shaking so hard I could barely scroll. The sound of the refrigerator humming in the background was the only noise in the house, besides the pounding of my heart in my ears. The message was still open, taunting me with its simplicity. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. It wasn't from me. I hadn't touched my wife in almost 2 weeks, not since she suddenly got too tired every night and started leaving for girls' nights that lasted until 2 a.m. I could have let it go. I could have shoved the phone back onto the counter and pretended I never saw it, gone back upstairs, climbed into bed beside her, and forced myself to believe that my marriage wasn't crumbling beneath my feet. But I couldn't. My fingers moved before my brain could process it, opening the message thread and scrolling up higher and higher, past all the texts I didn't want to read, but forced myself to anyway. The pet names, the late-night confessions, the explicit details of what they did together, things she never did with me. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash that I was powerless to stop. Footsteps creaked above me. I snapped out of my daze and locked the phone, shoving it back exactly where I found it. My wife, Emily, shuffled to the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. She was wearing my old college t-shirt, the same one she used to steal from me after our dates when we were just kids who thought love was forever. It made me sick to see it on her now. "Steve, what are you doing down there?" Her voice was thick with sleep, but there was an edge to it, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. "Just getting some water," I lied, turning toward the sink so she couldn't see my face. My throat was dry as sandpaper, my whole body vibrating with the need to confront her, to scream, to break something, but I forced myself to play it cool. I had one shot at this. If I acted too soon, she'd deny it. If I waited too long, I'd lose my mind. Emily lingered at the top of the stairs for a second before retreating back into the bedroom. I heard the mattress creak as she got back into bed, completely unaware that the walls of her perfect little lie were caving in around her. I stood there for a long time, gripping the edge of the counter, staring at the spot where her phone had been. My marriage was over. I knew it. The only thing left to decide was how much damage I was going to do before I walked away. I woke up before Emily the next morning, my body stiff from barely sleeping. I had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, running through every possible way this could go. I could wake her up right now and throw her phone in her face, demand the truth, and watch her scramble for excuses. I could pretend I didn't know anything, let her go about her day like nothing was wrong, and use the time to gather more proof, something undeniable. Or I could do what I was already doing, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her, feeling like a stranger in my own life. She stirred under the blanket, stretching out before her eyes fluttered open. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice soft, still heavy with sleep. She reached for me, resting her hand on my thigh like she had every morning for years. It made my skin crawl. "Morning," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. She yawned, sitting up, running a hand through her hair. "You okay? You look exhausted." I forced a small chuckle, shaking my head. "Didn't sleep great. Just thinking about work stuff." She nodded, stretching again before swinging her legs over the bed. "You worry too much. You should take a break today. Relax a little." Relax. The word almost made me laugh. She was standing in front of me, telling me to relax, completely oblivious to the fact that I had seen every disgusting message she had sent to some other man. She had probably been with him just hours before climbing into bed with me, kissing me good night like nothing was wrong. I watched as she walked into the bathroom, shutting the door behind her, and my stomach twisted. I needed to get out of the house before I did something I couldn't take back. By the time she came out, I was already dressed. "I'm heading out for a bit," I said, grabbing my keys off the dresser. She furrowed her brows. "Where?" "Just running some errands," I answered, not giving her the details she didn't deserve. She hesitated for a second before nodding. "Okay, want me to pick up dinner tonight?" I wanted to ask if she'd be too busy screwing her boyfriend, but I held my tongue. "Sure." I walked out before she could say anything else, slamming the door behind me. I didn't have a real destination in mind, but I needed somewhere to think. I ended up at a coffee shop a few blocks away, sitting in my car for a long time before finally going inside. I ordered a coffee I didn't want, sat down in the corner, and pulled out my phone. My hands hovered over the screen for a second before I started typing. Hey, do you have time to talk? I sent the message to Eric, my best friend since college, the only person I trusted to help me figure this out. It didn't take long for my phone to vibrate. Yeah, man, what's up? Meet me at the diner in 20? Be there. I drained half my coffee in one gulp, grabbed my keys, and left. Eric was already waiting for me when I got there, sitting in our usual booth. He had a concerned look on his face the second I slid into the seat across from him. What's going on? I exhaled, gripping the table. Emily's cheating on me. His eyes widened slightly, his posture stiffening. What? I pulled out my phone, opened the pictures I had taken of her messages last night, and slid it across the table. I didn't want to say the words out loud again. Eric's jaw clenched as he scrolled, his expression darkening with every passing second. Jesus, Steve. Yeah. He put the phone down, shaking his head. How long? I don't know. A couple of months, maybe longer. I didn't think to check before last night. Does she know you know? I shook my head. Not yet. He leaned back, running a hand over his face. What are you going to do? That was the real question, wasn't it? I had no idea. I had thought about it all night, but nothing felt right. I don't know, I admitted. Divorce is obvious, but I don't want her walking away thinking she got away with it. I need to do something first. I just don't know what. Eric nodded slowly. You need proof. Real proof. Screenshots of texts aren't enough in court. If she tries to screw you over, you need something that'll make sure she doesn't walk away with everything. I'd already considered it, but hearing it from him made it real. I need to catch her in the act, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Yeah, Eric agreed. And I think I know how. Eric leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to make me feel like we were plotting something criminal. Maybe we were. He looked me dead in the eye, his expression sharper than I'd seen in years. Listen, Steve, if you want to catch her, you need to stop acting like a guy who just found out his wife is cheating. Right now, she has no clue you know, which means she's going to keep making mistakes. If you blow up at her, she'll just hide things better or deny everything. But if you play dumb, she'll keep walking right into the trap. I clenched my jaw, gripping my coffee cup harder than necessary, but I knew he was right. I had wanted to scream at Emily the moment I saw those messages, but what would that have accomplished? Nothing. She would have cried, called me paranoid, spun it into some kind of misunderstanding. Instead, if I let her believe she was still in control, she'd keep slipping up, and I could hit her with something she couldn't talk her way out of. Eric exhaled, scratching his beard. Here's what we do. First, you need hard proof, video, audio, something that can't be explained away. Do you know where she's meeting him? I shook my head. Not yet, but she's been going out at night a lot. Says she's with her friends, but I doubt it. Then find out, he said simply. If she says she's going out, let her. Don't question her, don't act different. Just let her walk right into it. Meanwhile, we'll put a tracker in her car. I blinked. A tracker? Eric smirked. You'd be surprised what you can get online. Tiny GPS trackers, barely the size of a matchbox. We can stick one under her car, and you'll know exactly where she's going. Once we have that, you follow her. But don't go alone. You'll be too emotional, and she'll notice you if you're sloppy. That's where I come in. I stared at him, processing everything. It was insane. It was sneaky. It was something I never imagined myself doing. But it was also exactly what I needed. I had spent the last 12 hours feeling like I had no control over my own life. And now, for the first time since I saw those messages, I felt like I had a grip on something. You'd really help me with this? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Eric scoffed. Of course. I've known you for 20 years, man. I was at your wedding. You think I'm going to let you go through this alone? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. All right, let's do it. That night, I acted normal. It was harder than I thought it would be, sitting across from Emily at dinner, pretending I wasn't picturing her with another man. She chatted about her day like nothing was wrong, smiling at me between bites, probably thinking she had me wrapped around her finger. Every time her phone buzzed, I wondered if it was him. Every time she looked down at the screen, I wanted to rip it from her hands and see for myself. But I didn't. I smiled. I laughed at the right moments. I was the perfect, clueless husband. And then she did exactly what I needed her to do. So, I was thinking, she started, twirling her fork in her pasta, not looking at me. I might have another girl's night this weekend. You don't mind, right? I kept my face neutral, my stomach twisting. Of course not. You should have fun. Her eyes flickered to me, searching for any sign of suspicion. I gave her none. She smiled. Thanks, babe. That was all I needed. After dinner, when she went to shower, I sent a quick text to Eric. Saturday night. We're on. By Friday, the tracker had arrived. It was smaller than I expected, just a tiny black square with a magnetic strip on the back. We met up in Eric's garage, where he showed me how to link it to my phone. The app was simple, just a blinking dot on a map, showing the exact location of wherever the tracker went. Eric knelt beside Emily's car, reaching under the bumper. This spot is perfect. She'll never see it. I watched as he pressed the device against the metal, where it blended in completely. And this will actually work? Trust me, he said, standing up. Now we wait. Saturday dragged by at an unbearable pace. I pretended everything was normal, even as I counted down the hours until Emily left. When she finally did, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door like she wasn't about to betray me all over again. I watched from the window as she backed out of the driveway, my heart hammering in my chest. The second she was gone, I pulled out my phone. The little blinking dot on the map started moving. Eric pulled up in his truck a few minutes later, rolling down the window. You ready? I nodded, climbing into the passenger seat. Let's go. We followed the dot, trailing far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. She drove for about 15 minutes before pulling into a small hotel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. My hands clenched into fists as I watched her park. Eric swore under his breath. Well, that confirms it. We sat in silence for a long moment, watching. My wife, my partner of 10 years, had just walked into a cheap motel with another man. I finally exhaled, my voice steady. Now we get proof. Eric parked a little down the road, far enough that Emily wouldn't notice us, but close enough that we could see the entrance clearly. The reality of the situation settled in as we sat there, watching the front door of the motel like two men about to witness something that would change everything. My hands felt clammy, my jaw was tight, and for a second, I considered just getting out of the truck and storming in there, ripping open whatever door she had disappeared behind and dealing with it right then and there. But I wasn't stupid. I needed proof, real proof, and I wasn't going to let my emotions ruin this. Eric handed me a small camera, something he had picked up for situations like this, apparently. I didn't even want to ask how he knew so much about this kind of thing. This'll get you everything you need, he said, keeping his eyes on the parking lot. High definition, night vision sound, everything. I nodded, gripping it tightly. What do we get inside? Eric exhaled, running a hand over his face. That's the tricky part. We can't just walk in and ask which room your wife is screwing some guy in. But there's always a way. He grabbed his phone and started tapping away at the screen while I kept my eyes locked on the motel. It was a run-down place, the kind of place people use for quick, discreet affairs, which made me wonder just how many times she had done this. The thought made my stomach turn. Eric let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. People are so careless, he muttered, turning his phone toward me. Motel has online reviews with room pictures. Look at the key card in this one. See the number range? That means the rooms on the left side are all 100 to 110, and the right side is 200 to 210. She went to the right. I stared at him. You do this kind of thing often? He shrugged. I like to know things. Come on. We need to get closer. We got out of the truck, moving quietly toward the side of the building. The night was cool, the parking lot mostly empty except for a handful of cars. We stuck to the shadows, walking along the edge of the building until we reached the row of doors. The lights were dim, but it wasn't hard to tell which room was hers. The curtains weren't fully closed. I didn't want to look. Every part of me screamed to turn around, to just walk away and deal with this in some other way. But I had come this far. I had to see it. I stepped closer, slowly, my breath heavy as I raised the camera, angling it just right so I could get a clear view. And there she was, Emily, my wife. The woman I had built a life with. She wasn't alone. A man stood behind her, his hands on her waist, pulling her close. She was laughing, her head tilted back, looking happier than I had seen her in months. She leaned up, whispering something into his ear, and then she kissed him. I had seen enough. I hit record. Eric stood beside me, silent. He knew better than to say anything. I filmed for about a minute before lowering the camera. My hands were shaking, my chest tight, but I didn't feel the blind rage I expected. I just felt empty, like everything I had built, everything I had believed in, had turned to dust in front of me. I turned to Eric. Let's go. We walked back to the truck without a word. As soon as we were inside, Eric started the engine and pulled away from the motel. You got what you need? He asked, his voice careful. Yeah. He nodded. What now? I stared out the window, watching the buildings blur past. Now, I ruined her life. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. The idea of stepping through the front door, seeing Emily, pretending everything was normal while knowing exactly what she had done made me sick to my stomach. Instead, I crashed at Eric's place, staring at the ceiling for hours while the footage I had recorded replayed in my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. Every detail was burned into my brain. The way she smiled at him, the way she touched him so effortlessly, as if I didn't exist. I had spent years building a life with her, trusting her, loving her, and in return, she had given herself to someone else without a second thought. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, my plan was fully formed. I wasn't going to confront her in some dramatic, screaming match. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with fake tears or empty apologies. I was going to hit her where it hurt. Eric sat across from me at his kitchen table, sipping his coffee, watching me carefully. You sure you want to go through with this? I nodded, scrolling through my phone. Yeah. He let out a slow breath. All right. Just remember, once you do this, there's no going back. There's nothing to go back to, I muttered, standing up. I just need one more thing before I go home. 2 hours later, I pulled into my driveway, my pulse steady, my mind clear. Emily's car was already there, right where she had left it before sneaking off to meet her lover. I walked inside, and there she was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. She looked up, smiling. Hey, you were out early. Where'd you go? I set my bag down on the counter, meeting her eyes. Just had to take care of some things. She stretched her arms, letting out a soft yawn. I was thinking we could do something nice tonight. Maybe go out to dinner. I almost laughed. She had spent last night in a motel with another man, and now she wanted to go out with me like nothing had happened. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice even. That sounds good. But first, we need to talk. Something flickered in her expression, the first sign of nerves creeping in. Talk about what? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. I tapped the screen, and the video started playing. Her face drained of color. For the first few seconds, she didn't move, didn't say a word. She just stared at the screen as if blinking might make it disappear. Then, finally, she sucked in a sharp breath and shot up from her seat. Where did you get that? Doesn't matter, I said, my tone flat. What matters is that I know everything. Her hands trembled as she ran them through her hair, pacing back and forth. Steve, I can explain. No, you can't, I cut in. And I don't want to hear whatever excuse you've come up with. It's done, Emily. She stopped pacing, turning to me, her eyes wild. Please, just listen. Did you listen to me when I told you I loved you? When I trusted you? When I believed every single lie you told me? I shook my head, shoving my hands into my pockets to keep from slamming my fist into the table. You made your choice. You don't get to beg now. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. Maybe a few days ago I would have. Maybe I would have been weak enough to let her tears affect me, to believe she was sorry, to let her convince me to work things out. But that man didn't exist anymore. You should have thought about this before you spread your legs for someone else, I continued. Because now, everyone is going to know exactly who you are. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? I pulled out a small stack of papers from my bag and placed them on the table. Divorce papers, already signed by me. You can either sign them now, or I can make this a whole lot worse for you. Her face twisted in panic. Steve, please, we can fix this. I laughed, shaking my head. Fix this? You think I'd ever touch you again? Sleep next to you again? Trust you again? No, Emily. This isn't something you come back from. She stood there, frozen, her chest rising and falling rapidly. What do you mean by worse? I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my contacts before landing on the group message I had prepared. I mean, I have no problem sending this video to everyone. Your family, my family, your job, our friends. I looked up at her, holding her gaze. How long do you think it'll take before you lose everything? Her lips parted, a choked sound escaping her throat. You wouldn't. I smirked. Try me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she sat down, her hands trembling as she reached for the pen. She hesitated, glancing up at me one last time, searching for something. Mercy, maybe. She didn't find it. She signed her name. I grabbed the papers, slipping them back into my bag. You have a week to move out, I said, standing up. After that, I don't want to see you again. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, but I didn't feel a damn thing. I walked out the front door without looking back.